Dear students, I welcome you to this lecture on Lenin and his political ideology. The aim of this lecture is to discuss the life and works of Lenin as well as explore his political ideologies and understand his contributions to the world of politics. Considering this, the key objectives of the lecture are to examine Lenin's life and works, to discuss and assess his political theories and practices, to discuss Bolshevik revolution, to explain various political ideologies that Lenin espoused, to discuss Lenin as praxis and how his ideas were put into practice in the real world, to briefly discuss some of the criticism levied against Lenin and his economic model. By the end of this lecture, you will have a deeper understanding of Lenin's political ideology and its impact on the world. I encourage you to participate in this lecture actively, and I look forward to an enlightening and thought-provoking session. Dear students, first let's discuss the life and works of Vladimir Ilyich Lenin. Vladimir Ilyich Lenin was a Russian revolutionary political theorist and the first leader of the Soviet Union. He played a pivotal role in the October Revolution of 1917, which overthrew the Russian provisional government and established a socialist government in Russia. In the late 19th century, Lenin became involved in revolutionary activities and joined the Russian Socialist Democratic Labour Party. He later emerged as a leader of the Bolshevik faction within the party. Lenin advocated for a Marxist revolutionary strategy and emphasized the importance of a disciplined, centralized party of professional revolutionaries. His life and works have profoundly impacted the world, particularly in the realm of Marx theory and socialist politics. Born in 1870 in Simberg, Lenin was raised in a family of intellectuals. His mother educated him at home and later attended university in Kazan, where he became involved in revolutionary politics. Lenin's early political activities led to his arrest and exile to Siberia, where he continued to develop his ideas and writings. Lenin's most famous work, The State and Revolution, outlines his vision for a socialist state and the proletariat's role in achieving it. He also wrote extensively on imperialism, capitalism, and the party's role in revolutionary politics. His influential works include What is to be Done, published in 1902, and Imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism, which was published in 1916. In 1917, Lenin returned to Russia from exile in Switzerland after the February Revolution had overthrown the Tsarist regime. He played a leading role in organizing the Bolshevik Party and preparing for the October Revolution. The Bolsheviks, led by Lenin, seized power in Petrograd in October 1917, establishing the Russian Soviet Federative Socialist Republic. Lenin became the chairman of the Council of People's Commissars, effectively making him head of the government. He implemented a series of radical policies, including land redistribution, workers' control of industry, and the nationalization of banks and key industries. His policies, including the nationalization of industry and the collectivization of agriculture, had a significant impact on the Soviet economy and society. Lenin's political and theoretical contributions have had a profound impact on the Marxist thought and the development of the Soviet Union. His concept of vanguardism proposed that a disciplined party of professional revolutionaries should lead the working class in overthrowing the capitalist state. Additionally, Lenin expanded on Marxist theory of imperialism, arguing that it was the highest stage of capitalism. characterized by the export of capital, the dominance of monopolies, and the intensification of global conflicts. These ideas on imperialism and the organization of the socialist state have had a lasting impact on the Marxist theory and have been influential in the development of communist movements worldwide. In 1922, Lenin played a pivotal role in the establishment of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, a federal socialist state comprising multiple Soviet republics. However, Lenin's life and legacy remain a subject of debate. Supporters credit him for leading the Bolsheviks to power, laying the foundations for the Soviet Union, and championing socialist ideals. Nevertheless, his legacy is complex and continues to be scrutinized by scholars and political activists alike. Lenin's death on January 21, 1924, at the age of 53, marked the end of an era. His body was embalmed and placed on a permanent display in the Moscow's Red Square in the Lenin Mausoleum. Despite the controversies surrounding his legacy, Lenin's ideas and contributions continue to influence socialist and communist movements around the world. Dear students, let's understand Lenin and Bolshevik Revolution. Russia in the early 20th century was ruled by an autocratic monarchy under Tsar Nicholas II. The country faced social, economic, and political turmoil, including widespread poverty, discontent among workers and peasants, and military defeats in the World War I. In April 1917, Lenin, who had been living in exile, returned to Petrograd from Switzerland. He immediately began advocating for a socialist revolution and the overthrow of provisional government, which had assumed power after the February Revolution that ousted the Tsar, which ultimately resulted into the Bolshevik Revolution. The Bolshevik Revolution, also known as the Russian Revolution, was a significant event that took place in 1917. It resulted in the overthrow of Tsar's government and the rise of Bolshevik Party led by Vladimir Lenin. Lenin was a political thinker who believed that the working class should have the control over the government, and his ideas paved the way for the revolution. Lenin's ideas were revolutionary because he believed that the people should have the power to govern themselves. He believed that the capitalist system was exploitative and only a socialist revolution could create a fair and equal society. Lenin's vision for a socialist society was based on the idea of a collective ownership of the means of production. He believed that the workers who created the wealth in society should be the ones who controlled it. In October 1917, Vladimir Lenin and the Bolsheviks seized the power and established the world's first socialist state. This marked a significant turning point in Russian and world history, as Lenin's vision for a socialist society was realized through a series of decrees that radically transformed Russian society. These decrees included the nationalization of land, the abolition of private property, and the institution of a system of workers' control. Additionally, Russia's involvement in World War I was ended and the Soviet Union was established. However, the establishment of a Soviet Union was not without its challenges. The country faced a civil war and economic difficulties, and Lenin's policies, such as the policy of war communism, were criticized for being too harsh. In order to ensure the survival of the revolution, Lenin was forced to make concessions. The Bolshevik seizure of power triggered a bitter civil war that lasted from 1918 to 1922 with the Red Army led by Trotsky fighting against the various opposition groups collectively known as Whites. The war was marked by brutal fighting, atrocities and foreign intervention, with the Bolsheviks ultimately emerging victorious. Despite the challenges faced by the Soviet Union, Lenin's ideas and his leadership of Bolshevik Party remain a significant part of Russian and world history. The establishment of the Soviet Union marked the beginning of one of the first communist states and had a lasting impact on political, economic and social developments in the 20th century. In 1922, the Russian Soviet Federative Socialist Republic, along with other Soviet republics, formed the Union of Soviet Socialist Republic. Lenin became the leader of the new state, and the Bolshevik Party was renamed the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union went on to become a major global power and the world's first socialist state. Despite all the limitations and critique, the establishment of the Soviet Union under the Lenin's leadership was a significant event in the world history. Dear students, let us try and understand Lenin's political ideology. The political ideology associated with Lenin is commonly referred to as Leninism or Marxism-Leninism. It represents a unique interpretation and adaptation of Marx theory, building upon the ideas of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. Leninism is an ideology put forward by the Bolshevik Party led by Lenin, who played a pivotal role in the Russian Revolution of 1917. Leninism is basically a combination of Marxism, which emphasizes the theory of class struggle and the practical application of revolutionary tactics. Lenin's political ideology was aimed at establishing a socialist society with the ultimate goal of achieving a communist society. Lenin's political ideology is composed of several key components that are essential to understand his contributions to Marxist theory. First, Lenin combined his own contributions and interpretations with the core tenets of Marxism to form Marxism-Leninism. He believed that Marxism needed to be adapted to specific conditions of Russia and the international context of time. This adaptation was necessary to ensure the success of socialist revolution. Secondly, Lenin emphasized the necessity of a vanguard party to lead the working class in the revolution and establish socialism. This party, composed of dedicated revolutionaries, would act as the catalyst for the revolution and guide the proletariat in their struggle against a capitalist system. Thirdly, Lenin argued for the establishment of a dictatorship of proletariat as a transitional phase between capitalism and communism. This dictatorship, exercised through the vanguard party, would be a temporary measure to suppress the resistance of the bourgeoisie and facilitate the construction of a socialist society. Fourthly, Lenin developed a theory of imperialism as the highest stage of capitalism. He believed that the imperialism was driven by the need for capitalist powers to exploit resources and markets abroad. Lenin argued that the imperialism led to the exploitation and oppression of nations, and he advocated for the self-determination of oppressed nations as part of revolutionary struggle against imperialism. Fifthly, Lenin emphasized the importance of armored revolution to overthrow the bourgeoisie and establish a socialist state. He believed in the necessity of a disciplined and centralized revolutionary party that could organize and lead the working class in this process. Lastly, Lenin advocated for the centralized planning of economy and the state control. This approach, according to Lenin, would ensure that the resources were allocated efficiently and the needs of the working class were prioritized. Lenin's political ideology represents a unique interpretation and adaptation of Marxist theory. Now, let me come to another important section of this lecture, which is about Lenin as praxis. Lenin emphasized the importance of revolutionary action and practical measures to achieve the goals of socialism and the liberation of the working class. In this context, Lenin's role in political praxis or the application of theory to the practical actions was central to his political career. He believed that the theory must be linked to action and the revolutionaries should actively engage in organizing and leading the working class to bring about social change. Lenin as a praxis encompasses his practical application of Marxist ideas through his actions, both as a leader of a revolution and as a politician. One of Lenin's key contributions to Marxism was the concept of vanguard party, a party of the most class-conscious and politically advanced members of the proletariat who would lead the revolution. In practice, Lenin formed the Bolshevik party as such, and through his leadership and guidance, the party was able to successfully overthrow the provisional government and establish Soviet power in Russia. This exemplifies Lenin's understanding of praxis as the practical application of theory in order to achieve a result, as he was able to put his ideas into motion and ultimately achieve his goal. Another example of Lenin's praxis lies in his implementation of the new economic policy. In the early Soviet Union, the new economic policy allowed for small-scale private enterprise and reintroduced market mechanisms in order to revive the economy after the devastation of the Russian Civil War. This was a departure from the pure Marxist theory, which calls for the abolition of private property, but Lenin recognized the necessity of practical measures in order to achieve the eventual goal of communism. Furthermore, Lenin's praxis was evident in his internationalist perspective. He believed that the socialism could only be achieved on a global scale and therefore supported the spread of revolution throughout the world. Lenin led the Comintern, which aimed to coordinate revolutionary efforts across different countries and was actively involved in supporting communist movements abroad. This again demonstrated his practical application of Marxist ideas, as he recognized that the success of socialism in one country was dependent on the success of global proletariat. Lenin's praxis also extended to his approach to governance. As the first leader of the Soviet Union, he faced the challenge of building a new political system from scratch, and his practical approach was evident in his leadership style. He emphasized the importance of democratic centralism, a principle in which decisions are made through a democratic process, but then strictly adhered to by all members of the party. This allowed for both freedom of discussion and unified action, a practical solution to the need for a political unity in building a new society. However, Lenin's praxis was not without controversy. His use of violence and repression against political opponents has been heavily criticized and raises questions about the ethics of praxis. While Lenin believed in the necessity of force in certain situations, such as during the Civil War, his use of violence has been the subject of debate among Marxist theorists. Some argue that it was a necessary means to an end, while others argue that it was ethically questionable and went against the principles of socialism. Thus, Lenin's praxis was characterized by his practical application of Marxist theory in order to achieve a goal. From his leadership of the Bolshevik Party and successful revolution in Russia to his implementation of new economic policy and the internationalist perspective, Lenin's actions demonstrated his commitment to practical solutions. However, his approach to governance and use of violence raise important ethical questions about the limits of praxis. Nevertheless, Lenin's contributions to Marxist theory and practice continue to be studied and debated among the scholars and activists today. Lenin's praxis as a revolutionary leader was characterized by his commitment to organizing the working class, building a disciplined party, and applying Marxist theory to concrete conditions of the Russian Revolution. His approach to praxis continues to be influential in Marxist and socialist movements around the world. Now let me discuss some of the criticism which has been raised against Lenin's political ideology. Over the years, Lenin and his economic model have been subject of criticism. Some of the criticism leveled against him include his authoritarian approach to governance, which was seen as oppressive and undemocratic. Additionally, his economic policies were criticized for being too centralized and not allowing for individual initiative and entrepreneurship. Furthermore, Lenin's implementation of new economic policy was seen as a retreat from his earlier socialist policies, which led to accusation of inconsistency and a lack of commitment to the socialist cause. Critics also pointed out that the new economic policy favored the wealthy and privileged, which went against the principles of socialism. Trotskyists assert that the implementation of Marxist-Leninism resulted in the establishment of a degenerated worker state. However, philosopher Eric Voegelin posits that the Marxist-Leninism is inherently oppressive at its core. He argues that the Marxian vision dictated the Stalinist outcome not because the communist utopia was inevitable, but because it was impossible. Critics have scrutinized this line of reasoning for its philosophical determinism, which suggests that the negative events in the movement's history were predetermined by their convictions. Historian Robert Vincent Daniels contends that the Marxism was employed to justify Stalinism, but it was no longer permitted to serve as either a policy directive or an explanation of reality during Stalin's reign. It is essential to note that the debate surrounding Marxist-Leninism's role in history is complex and multifaceted. While some argue that it is inherently oppressive, others maintain that it is a viable political ideology that can be implemented successfully. Despite these criticisms, it is important to note that the Lenin's economic model was instrumental in the development of Soviet Union and had a significant impact on the global political economic landscape. Moreover, Lenin's economic model was instrumental in the development of the Soviet Union and had a significant impact on the global political and economic landscape. While there were certainly flaws in his approach, it cannot be denied that the Lenin's ideas and policies continue to shape the world we live in today. Dear students, while concluding this lecture, we can say that the Lenin was a transformative figure who played a crucial role in shaping the course of 20th century through his leadership, political theories, and revolutionary praxis. As the leader of the Bolshevik Party and the architect of the October Revolution, Lenin successfully led the overthrow of provisional government and laid the groundwork for the establishment of the Soviet Union. Lenin's contributions to Marxist theory, including his analysis of imperialism, provide a framework for understanding the dynamics of global capitalism and the potential for revolutionary change. He emphasized the need for a disciplined vanguard party, mass mobilization, and practical implementation of socialist policies. Lenin's ideas and practices influenced communist movements around the world and continue to be subject to interpretation and debate. While Lenin's legacy is complex and contested, his impact on history cannot be denied. His leadership shaped the early years of Soviet Union, and his policies had far-reaching consequences for social, economic, and political developments within the country. Lenin's ideas and actions also had a profound influence on the broader international socialist and communist movements. Whether viewed as a visionary leader who championed the cause of the working class and inspired revolutions, or as a controversial figure associated with authoritarianism and the suppression of dissent, Lenin remains a significant figure in history whose ideas and actions continue to be examined and debated by scholars and activists alike. So, dear students, I hope you have found it beneficial. I look forward to seeing you again for our next lecture, which will cover a different topic. Until then, take care and goodbye.